some of the misconceptions and biases about refugees or diasporas that you would like the community of councils to know about, and maybe give us just a few takeaways on how do we recognize what those biases and misconceptions are.
Everyone has biases. This is something that somebody will lie if they say they never discriminated against someone or never felt or had a stereotype or a bias in their brain. But for the topic of today, when we talk about a specific audience, biases, misconception, and prejudice, they're all ideas and thoughts. They become dangerous when we put those into policies, when we use our own biases and prejudice and making them affecting a larger group of people based on how we feel and how we think, or the amount of information that we receive, whether it's accurate, factual information or just a myth. But in order for us to find a solution and to get to the roots of every issue, we first have to confront our own biases. We have to find what do we see when we look at someone? What do we have ingrained in our brain when we think of Africa, when we think of women in general, or women coming from Africa? And I'm going to stay in Africa here because I'm originally from Sudan. So stereotypes and biases actively harm refugees, such as myself. We fall into three categories when someone look at us, and I'm going to say me because I still identify as a refugee. Those attack either the culture, our culture, their character, my character, and my existence, or a refugee's existence. To me, those are the three for the time. Culture. Refugees are often labeled by the culture they are perceived, not who they are. Believe it or not, up to today, I came here 23 years ago, and this has become my home. I still get go back home. I don't have a home. This is my home. Pennsylvania is my home. And I get the same question and the thought that Africa and African are a single country, not a continent. With one culture, they tend to label African and Africa as poor, disease-ridden, uneducated, and prone to violence. Although some areas, just like any civilization, has its negative and positive aspect, but when the media only highlights the negativity and ignore the positive, it creates a confirmation bias. And that reinforces these misconceptions. And blindly, we follow these misconceptions in our daily life, and I am not, I can't say I'm not, and I didn't do that on my own personal life. We ignore the historical context that create these biases. When we talk about Africa, for example, let's acknowledge that poverty, war, and unequal opportunities in Africa was orchestrated. The reason Africa has been stripped of its resources is because of colonialism, right? Leaving political instability and destruction, wars, that led people to flee their home and in an attempt to find safety and a refuge, just like myself. So when we label refugees from Africa, for an example, by their preconceived or our preconceived notion of African, we strip them of their humanity and individuality. That's the first one. The second is character. The refugee experience is not a monolith. So no two stories are alike. Just like with autism, we say when you meet one child with autism, you met one child with autism. When you met a refugee, you met one refugee. Just as none of us are the same. Yet society often categorizes refugees as illegal, burdensome, and outsiders. I lived in Pennsylvania for 23 years, and it's a beautiful state. But when I go to different states, I'm still considered an outsider, even though this is all I know. We saw this clearly, and for me personally, I came here June 6, 2001. Does that ring a bell? September 11 happened a couple months after, and I was new to the US, and to be like I fled from the same violence to come and face it in my new home, Pennsylvania, and moreover, to be looked at as part of the problem without knowing my story. And as much as I understand it now, understand the fear, and it was hurtful and hard for me to swallow back then, because I am a victim of violence myself. And to come and be labeled as the problem, as a violence person, as a terrorist, because your name or your feature resembles someone who made an attack. That's summing up all refugees and someone who doesn't look like you with something that you don't know. So we are not, what I want to say in this area, that refugees mostly are not violent. Just like with any culture, people are good and bad. But for the most majority, refugees are flying or left their homes to escape violence. And, you know, by now you might just say, we don't know your story. You know, I'm summarized to maybe one title. I wear many hats, but by looking at me, you will see the end result. You can search my name and see that, oh, she got her life put together. She's a serial entrepreneur. I am an author. I am active in my community. I'm an activist. I am, like, from the surface, you will say, what are you complaining about? But until you know somebody's story, you truly don't know who they are. I identify as a torture survivor. I don't care how many titles I have. I'm a torture survivor. I'm a refugee, a woman rights and human rights activist. I was one of few female spokespersons for the Democratic Forefront in Sudan. And for that, I faced torture. I was hung from a tree for 10 hours, beaten from my head to my toe until my whole body was numb. I smelled my own blood. This was not an isolated incident. This happened over and over and over for 6 years. During the al-Bashir regime, I was just 15 years old. But this is went through my college. You're not gonna know the scar that I buried. I was beating, my head was bashed open. This is all because I was speaking against the same violence that I was labeled as such. We don't have time to tell you my whole story, but that journey, and to get to the point that there was a bounty put on my head so anyone can find me in Sudan could kill me and not face any consequences. I was detained at the ghost house, and I'm sure many of you now might know what that, but back in the 90s, that was not known. Ghost, it means ghost. You are put in a place that no one knows where you're at. You are beaten, sexually assaulted, and at that time, they were sexually assaulting, which means they will strip you, they will hurt you, you don't get full raped. And as sad as this sounds, I feel privileged that I did not get assaulted to the max. But since 2013, women are subjected to that. That led me, with the help of the UN, to be forced to leave my home. And no one, not any refugee that I met and you will meet, will tell you that they woke up one day and they said, I want to leave everything that I know and I want to go start new somewhere where I'm going to be treated differently. People normally choose that as a surviving method, as a way to live. For me, it was either die, get sexually assaulted every day, human trafficked, which was, we were threatened by that, or leave for the unknown. I didn't know where I'm going to be placed. I stayed for a whole year as a refugee with the help of the UN. I was almost homeless. I did not know my future or anything. Refugees often feel when they survive, the worst is over. But then we came here, and you face a whole new battle under a new sky.
That's the only difference.